Broadcasting live to the world. Now, it's Sheila Zielinski.
This is a very sinister Luciferian eugenics plan. These spineless weasels preach what people want to hear. They replace repentance with dreams of the good life. Mindless minions. Dying daily, taking up your cross, suffering and sacrificing have been superseded with name it and claim it. And as dark as I know it looks out there, the good news is that God is advancing his kingdom. And it's very exciting to be a part of his great commission.
It's Sheila Zielinski. Sheila Zielinski Show, the only show to give you the truth behind the headlines, prophecy, and the deeper things of God. Now, here is your host, end-time watchwoman, Sheila Zielinski.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sheila Zielinski Show for this Monday, January 25th. We're flying through January here. You can listen weekdays at 6 p.m. Eastern right here. And don't forget to sign up for the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune into the broadcast today. As you know, I just played my old intro, and the reason being because it really is true what I said in that intro. And I say the good news is God is advancing his kingdom. That's really true, and I wanted to keep that in there. So if you like the old intro that I just played, let me know. Or if you want me to keep the new one, I sometimes just like to get a little feedback on that. So anyway, we have a fantastic guest scheduled. He's coming on right away. Fritz Springmeier, highly acclaimed author of Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And we're going to get into some really interesting topics that Fritz doesn't usually talk about. So that'll be really interesting, as well as the new app. The app is so exciting. So go to the App Store and you can download the Smart Device app. I love it. I'm using it, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback. So if you want to find that app or you want some more information on how to listen to this show, just simply go to weekendvigilante.com, click on the Listen tab, and it shows you all the ways to listen, including this Friday. We're going to have the call-in show, and I cannot wait to talk to you, the listener. I am so excited about a new contest. I originally had a contest posted on Facebook, and of course, everybody was submitting duplicates, so it was very hard to actually find a winner since everybody, it was a great idea that I had, but it wasn't exactly thought out the best. So I talked to Steve Quayle on the weekend, and guess what, folks? Listen to this. Steve is up the ante. A grand prize package in this giveaway worth over $1,000. Every one of Steve Quayle's books personally signed by him, as well as his documentaries, are thrown in that package. So value of over $1,000. I want to win that contest. So these are the 3 clues, and all you have to do is email me the show once you find it. Here it goes. 3 clues. Approximately 10 years ago. That's a timeline hint. Now here's your 2 clues, so pay close attention. Invisible will become visible. And the final clue. Monsters' worst nightmares. Okay, so there you have it. Good luck on the contest. I hope everybody gets a submission in. You might have to go back and dig through some shows approximately 10 years ago, roughly. And again, invisible will become visible, and then monsters' worst nightmares. So there you have it. That's all the clues you get. Hope you find the show. And do get your submissions into me before February 12th. And the man himself will be on the show, Steve Quayle, to make the announcement February 15th, the Steve Quayle Grand Prize winner. And I'm so excited because that is an incredible bundle. That's amazing. Over $1,000 worth of stuff. Wonderful. As you know, last week I was co-hosting, but I'm back on my own show now. So don't forget, this Friday, January 29th, do call in. I want to hear from you, the listener, to weigh in on whatever you want to talk about. That's going to be fun on Fridays, too. Have a conversation with you, the listener. So it's going to be an exciting week. And finally, last but certainly not least, I will be in Dallas, Texas, March 18th to the 20th at the Hear the Watchman event. Later today, I will have a direct link at weekendvigilante.com for all the information. I'm going to be on the media panel and helping Doug and Joe, and it's going to be a fantastic event. I will definitely be seeing you out there. That's going to be very exciting. And I've got word that Augusto Perez is also going to be having an event March 4th, 5th, and 6th in Houston, Texas. So the Lone Star State is going to have some awesomeness in the month of March 2016. I'll be giving you some more details about that when Augusto returns from his missions trip. But tentatively schedule those 2 dates in March 4th, 5th, and 6th. And, of course, the 18th, 19th, 20th, Hear the Watchman. I'm going to have very limited books there, so if you want to get your book signed, bring it out. Or if you want to go to greengospel.ca today, order the book in advance. I certainly will sign a copy for you at that March 18th to the 20th event. I've got so many emails asking if I was going to be there, so the official word is, yes, I am. So I'll see you there in March. So excited to see everyone out there. I'm hoping sometime this week that maybe I can have a roundtable with some of those speakers. Wouldn't that be great? So we'll try to set that up for Thursday. My guest is the highly acclaimed author, researcher, and prolific writer. He's an expert on the Illuminati. He's written incredible books on the subject, stuff other people just haven't touched. You just cannot find this stuff in these books anywhere else. He's a West Point attendee. He is truly one of the progenitors of exposing these Luciferian kingpins and New World Order secret societies. And it is so good to have him back on the show because it's been a while since I had him on. Welcome back to the program, Fritz Springmeier. Pleasure to have you on, sir.
Thank you, Sheila. It's been a while.
It certainly has been a while, for sure, since I've had you on. Fritz, I discovered something today again. It surfaced again this week that I have something in common with Osama Bin Laden. Apparently him and I have the same books on our shelf. Were you surprised when these mainstream talking heads like CBS and UK Telegraph reporting a newly released list of Osama Bin Laden's bookshelf contents that have revealed the Al-Qaeda leader was obsessed with 9/11 conspiracy theories, U.S. military strategies, and dabbling in works about the Illuminati bloodlines? As a matter of fact, your book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, was apparently on his shelf. I don't know if I'd want to have my book on his shelf, but were you surprised at that?
Yes, I was. And why is it being brought up now, years later? Can you answer that for me?
Why now? Such a good question. I own the book, and that is quite a book, let me tell you. But it makes me nervous when these guys are going to throw around a book title like that. Where are they going with that? It's kind of suspicious, isn't it?
Yes. Well, it's an interesting book because in the beginning, I show how 25 American presidents are closely related. Osama Bin Laden wanted to see the genealogy charts on because he was going to have to be dealing with American leaders that are all of a few bloodlines.
Yeah, you really break the bloodlines down and so much more. I have that book here on my shelf, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And let me tell you, it is such a wealth of information. I have never read a 620-page jam-packed book like this with just mind-numbing insight. The connection of the dots is frightening, to say the least. And of course, writing a book myself, of course, half the size of yours, it's just very daunting to do that. I know that my information's only half the size of yours, and yet it took me 5 years. How long did it take you to get all the information for it and write this book, Fritz?
Well, the chapters were all originally articles, and each article I devoted 1 month to. So each chapter was a month of writing and research. And so you have about 15 months right there of research and writing. A person has to be familiar with the subjects before you start writing on them. So, you could always say that there was even more time than those 15 months, but definitely 15 months were devoted to the articles that were then collated into the book.
Well, let me just say the time, the research that goes into writing a book like this certainly gives me a profound new respect for you as an author. Now, as an author, one of the things that I struggled with personally is, wow, look at the information I'm presenting. No one else was covering exactly this stuff. And there's always that thought as you're actually going through the content in your book, when you're exposing this kind of material, you really feel like, yikes, I could be on the chopping block very soon.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was definitely on the chopping block. In fact, we are very lucky that earlier today, the Geek Squad completed, it took them 3 days to get my computer back to working. I didn't even have Skype earlier. Like yesterday, we couldn't have done this. And back in the year 2000, I had a program that showed on my website where where visitors came from. And 65% of my hits were coming from Langley, Virginia, the CIA. They were just constantly every minute checking on what I was doing. It was insane. So these people they try to make it difficult for my computer to work. So we're really fortunate that I'm able to make this interview with you today.
Yeah, I know the feeling to get messed with. It can be a real pain. Now, one of the things that I heard several months ago, I don't know if you saw this, but Jim Carrey was on a late night talk show and he was jokingly talking about the Illuminati. The Illuminati, there's a video circulating. Of course, people can look that up. But, Fritz, we've got this ubiquitous Illuminati pop culture craziness with symbolism everywhere. All these young kids today being influenced by trendy Holly Illuminati pawns of the music and movie industry. And the Illuminati really has infused their tentacles into everything in society. And yet for years, the Illuminati to most has been this sort of nebulous clandestine group. But now it's not even so clandestine. They're getting more brazen all the time, aren't they?
Right. The name Illuminati was secret, and the concept that they existed was secret. And now they're no longer concerned that people realize that they do exist. And so, yeah, it's the main thing I think that they're using Hollywood and all these teenage idols for is just to give themselves a popular image. The teenagers are very impressionable, so they see their idols do these Illuminati hand signs and say that, this is something cool, and they think the Illuminati's cool. But the real nuts and bolts of the Illuminati is not these entertainers in Hollywood. They've been doing this, and they just have this confidence that, when I was networking with these Illuminati leaders, communicating with them, it was just really clear. And some of the things that they said, they just have this overall confidence that they have their power is so embedded in the warp and woof of everything that they don't need to fear anything. They're beyond intimidation.
Yeah, beyond intimidation. That's a good point. What I find so fascinating, Fritz, it's typically put out there on the internet and circulated widely that historically the name refers to the Bavarian Illuminati founded in 1776, along with other secret societies that were supposedly outlawed by the Bavarian rulers Charles Theodore, of course, with the encouragement from the Roman Catholic Church, I'm sure, but permanently disbanded in 1785. But that's not really accurate, is it?
No. And it's misleading, too, because it's really distracting people from what the organization is really like. It's Bloodlines, and the book we referred to, that was supposedly, or I guess, as far as I know, it was in Osama Bin Laden's library. Bloodlines of the Illuminati, as the title is indicating, the Illuminati consists of these bloodlines, and that's what makes it so powerful. Is this thing is generational. They have several groups that are assigned they're in charge of making sure that there's continuity from one generation to the other of their agenda.
Right. Well, in my book, Green Gospel, one of the things I talk about is that the pagan pantheism really dates back to Nimrod. And I get into, of course, the Roman, Grecian, Egyptian, and Babylonian eras. But because these Luciferian generational bloodlines goes back to antiquity, Nimrod, the Ammonites, the Edomites, these really are satanic families who've positioned themselves throughout history in powerful positions, essentially controlling the world. And their calling card is their New World Order, but it's very steeped deeply in occultism. And for new listeners who haven't heard that, get into that for us, Fritz.
Well, there's so many different ways to approach it. One is to think of a person's theology is going to follow their morality. And if you are doing the horrendous things like John D. Rockefeller did, you're going to have a theology that justifies it. So even if they hadn't been Satanists, they definitely would become Satanists just to justify what they're doing, all the wars that they create and so forth. But the fact is it's hard to say which came first, the chicken or the egg, which came first, their Satanism or their evil deeds. But they were the leaders of the mystery religions back in antiquity, and that gets back into mind control, and they have carried out mind control on their own children, making them into program multiple personalities. And the reason I bring that up is because on a day-to-day surface, there will be a personality that comes across as very good, as a community leader. So these people are the people that people look up to. They're the philanthropists among us, the rich community leaders. There are Billy Grahams and so forth that everybody looks up to. But they have multiple personalities, and there's an evil side to them. They're the people that created our system. People ask the question of me, well, when did they take over? It's not a matter of them taking over. They're the ones that created the system. You go back to the banking system, these powerful families like the Medicis, the Rothschilds, these were bankers. They were the ones that loaned money to the kings. We so oftentimes think that kings are the ones in power, but there are people behind kings, their advisors and their financiers that have even more power than them. And my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book showed how there were two Freemen, and Freeman was an Illuminati family, one of the top 13 families. And nobody's even really heard of the Freeman family. It's not got the notoriety as the Rothschilds, but several of our presidents, their top advisor was one of these Freemen. And, who has more power? Somebody who's advising the president what to do, or the president who's actually functioning sort of like a puppet who carries it out?
Yes, sort of the power behind the throne, so to speak. Now, speaking of power behind certain organizations, for lack of a better word, one of the stunning things that I learned is that Charles Taze Russell, the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses, he is a Russell bloodline, which is one of the 13 families You write so much information on exposing the Jehovah's Witnesses. Was that a shock to you, Fritz?
Yes, it was. First I discovered that the leadership within the Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters, which is Bethel in Brooklyn, New York, the string pullers there are Illuminati. Somebody who was at Bethel tipped me off that the string pullers in the Mormon church and the string pullers in the Jehovah's Witnesses who are Illuminati would just get on the phone and talk to each other. So then discovered that Charles Taze Russell and some of the other leaders of the top leaders of the Jehovah's Witnesses were Freemasons. And so then I was investigating, well, could Charles Taze Russell be of the Russell Illuminati family? And yes, I was able to determine that. Definitely. Not only was he a Freemason, but he was Illuminati. And the Rothschilds helped finance the early Watchtower Society. And there was a man who said that he was in Germany and Switzerland. He said that the Watchtower Society, at the time they called their people Bible students, international Bible students, but the society that controlled them was still called the Watchtower Society back then. And he was claiming that the rich elite were sending money to the Watchtower Society in Europe via the Masonic lodges. And so that man was sued, and he brought out letters that he presented in court that proved just what he was saying. And I had the German article. It was in the 1920s that this article came out. I had the German article, photocopy of it, in the paper reporting on this court event. So it was even proved in court that the elite were financing the Watchtower Society through these Masonic lodges. In the early history of the Jehovah's Witnesses, they didn't have their own meeting places. They were meeting in Masonic lodges. Of course, they call these Masonic halls. And so then when they started having their own buildings were copied a lot of the things of the Masonic halls, and they called them kingdom halls. You'll notice that it's standard in a Masonic hall to have fake windows. And if you go to a Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall, they have fake windows too.
Well, back in the day, I went to the Kingdom Hall with a very good friend of mine. She was my very good friend, and I went a lot to this Kingdom Hall. Of course, I had to get it delivered for that. But anyway, and of course, I got to see the inner workings. They don't like to get involved in politics. They don't like you to question anything. And they are adamant that you do not read any literature that exposes the truth about them. And yet they call themselves the truth. Internal people call themselves the truth, and yet they do not believe in speaking in tongues. They think that's demonic. And of course, what's outstanding is they don't believe in being filled with the Holy Ghost. I think they just skip the whole book of Acts completely. And I don't think they are very much into eschatology, certainly not the book of Revelations, the way they translate it. Yikes. So, you're not allowed to challenge anything, ask questions. You just got to be a mindless minion and just follow orders and nod your head. I mean, that's really convenient, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, a Jehovah's Witness here in Portland, talking to this old Jehovah's Witness who's been a Jehovah's Witness for many years, he had never heard of the Antichrist. Here's this organization supposedly warning us about Armageddon. But if you look at their warnings about Armageddon, they don't give anything. You've noticed in my writings how many details I give. And I mean, I uncover the world system in detail. Well, the Watchtower Society doesn't give anything but a bunch of propaganda milk. This guy hadn't even heard of the Antichrist. What's the Antichrist?
That is so ridiculous. And yet they're always talking about the coming kingdom. What kingdom is that? Since true Christians are of the devil, they're the only true religion. They report in one of their publications that Jesus is not God. He's actually the Archangel Michael. They deny Jesus bodily rose from the dead. They think only 144,000 of them are going to rule and reign with Jesus, and the rest will just, live forever in a paradise earth, never meeting the one who died for them, Jesus Christ, because after all, it's all about Jehovah. Yet Jehovah himself says, hey, pals, there's only one way to the Father, me, and that's through my Son. But they conveniently leave that out. And of course, salvation is impossible outside of the Watchtower. And you're never allowed to, as I said, question anything. Don't question the Watchtower Society or question the teaching or the literature or the local leadership. They have falsely predicted the end of the world 5 times or more. You have to read only their Watchtower literature and their theological study books and their reasoning from the scripture book. All their own books. Never are you allowed to read any apostate literature. That's anything that speaks out against them. And the frightening part is you only can read their Bible translation. And guess what it is? It's not the King James. It's called what I like to call the New World Order Bible translation. Well, basically, because it's the New World Translation. I mean, that is the kicker with this devilish cult. That's unbelievable.
Yes. And the Douglas Walsh trial in 1954, the reason why it took place was that Jehovah's Witnesses Watchtower Society were trying to become a legal religion in Scotland. So there was this trial where the government was actually put the Watchtower Society leaders under oath. And I printed up that whole entire trial transcript, which was long and huge. It was like massive. It had to reduce the trial transcript. But from that, we know where the Jehovah's Witness New World Translation came from. It was just a bunch of their leaders who had no Greek or Hebrew experience. They were not language scholars at all. They just sat around a table and they went verse by verse and wrote it up as they wanted it to say so that they could weed out any doctrines that they didn't want. So it's not really even a translation. And people will want to get my Be Wise as Serpents book if they want to follow up about what I'm about to talk about, which is what they actually say is going to happen in Armageddon and after Armageddon. Because I was a missionary, a Christian missionary, to bring Jehovah's Witnesses to Christ for 10 years. And we had 2 complete libraries that had everything that they had ever put out. And so I went in there and I did some in-depth research from their books, from their magazines, from everything that they had said about what's going to happen in Armageddon and after Armageddon. And I was absolutely shocked, Sheila.
Wow.
And I wrote that up as a chapter in the Be Wise as Serpents book, and I called it The Watchtower's Mein Kampf, because if you saw all of the paragraphs that I saw in doing this research, you're absolutely shocked. It's just like Hitler's Mein Kampf. They say that in the New World, magic and occult will be practiced. When you actually read this, when you see all of the different quotes I put together, it's like something that the Illuminati would have written. You would be absolutely shocked at the things that I read. And they basically say that this new world that all these Jehovah's Witnesses are wanting to survive into is going to be basically slavery. And if you don't think exactly what you're supposed to, you're going to be deleted. And I mean, it's all put together, the references and everything, in one of my chapters in that Be Wise as Serpents book.
Yes, that book is absolutely frightening and shocking, and it just covers so much. I highly recommend people do get that if they want proof of what we're talking about. Now, of course, going back to what I said about the 144,000, when you really look at prophetic end-time Bible prophecy, I mean, tie that in. What is your take on this term they always use, 144,000 chosen? Break that down for us.
Well, I believe that the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, these are apocalyptic images, and they're telling us spiritual truths. So prophecy is truth. It's God's truth. And truth is always truth. So where I differ from most people is most people are trying to say, well, this verse applies in only one circumstance. But what I'm trying to get people to realize is these are truths for our spiritual benefit, and they apply every day. So we need to look at them as how they apply. And I think in the everyday application, we see that 144,000 is like a number of perfection. And these saints they're God's perfect people. And so the number is not an actual number that, when we get to heaven and we take a head count, we're going to see 144,000. But it's a symbolic number of perfection. If we go back and we look at the history of Christianity, for instance, I have the book Martyr's Mirror, and the book Martyr's Mirror is a record of all of the Christians from Stephen, who was the first martyr, on through the years. And it will give, it'll say like, in 153 AD, such and such group of people were arrested and their testimony was such, and then they were put to death by being burned or fed to the lions or blah, blah. So there's this record of thousands and thousands of Christian martyrs. And so when you see that there's been far more than 144,000. That number is outnumbered, if you'll pardon the pun. There's been lots more Christians that have paid the final price and made the total sacrifice and had a good testimony. So historically, we can realize that is a symbolic number, and it represents perfection. We read in the book of Revelation of the 12 tribes, and you'll notice that the tribe of Dan, which was one of the original tribes, is left out of the list in the book of Revelation because they're just an evil group that's tied in with the Illuminati. And you'll notice that Joseph, that tribe, which was broken into Ephraim and Manasseh, gets a double portion of the blessing because Joseph was such a godly man. So we are grafted into Israel. As Christians, it says in the Word of God that we were grafted in. Well, there's a continuity of the people of faith of the Old Testament and the people of faith after the Old Testament and what people calls the New Testament. If one understands the way the covenants work, which most people don't, but the covenants build on each other. They don't replace each other. They don't outdate each other. It's not like the new covenant made the old covenants obsolete. There were several covenants in what's called the Old Covenant, the Old Testament. But all of them build. It's building. So, you have this group of people of faith that stretches back to antiquity,
Yeah, it stretches back to Enoch and so forth. And of course, we know what Enoch predicted about all the evil running roughshod in the end times, and springboarding into exactly what we're talking about here. These insidious, demonic, Luciferian, Illuminati, call them what you will, with all their dark occult powers, their witchcraft, their mind control. They really believe with all this that they're going to be able to pull off their big plan, don't they?
Well, they have total confidence that they're going to pull off their plan. The way they function with the mind control and then controlling us in general, whether it's in their total mind control or whether it's just the way they herd the rest of us, is they know very well how people think. And if you create chaos, you make people dependent on them because they're the only ones that can bring order out of the chaos. So, we're going to see a global financial meltdown. And of course, we're going to have to depend on them who created all of these things like the Federal Reserve and the IMF. They run the Federal Reserve, their people run the IMF. We're going to turn to them to try to rescue us from the chaos that they have created. And the same thing works with the trauma-based mind control. Is the poor victim has so many different personalities that they have to depend on the programmer to sort things out to function. So likewise, we see, it's like Dearborn, Michigan. That county has now got Sharia law. You just see all of this, the breakdown of our culture. And they're moving around the world. They're moving militaries, preparing our military for martial law scenario, a breakdown of order. And, they're practicing snatch and grab inserts, which is the kind of stuff that would precede a martial law scenario. So as things collapse and fall apart, of course, people are going to look to leaders to save them. And then we will get these Franklin Delano Roosevelt types come in. If you go back and look at the Delano family, I'm sure you're familiar with that. One of those elite families that made so much money off of running drugs to China in the opium.
Yes.
So FDR comes in and rescues the country from the Depression and then does all kinds of social engineering in the process. This is what we're looking at again. We're looking at another depression being created, and then these elite leaders like FDR will come in and be everybody's hero.
Yeah, like Hegelian dialect. We create the problem, and then we'll swoop in like the good guys for the solution. Yeah, everyone's hero. And of course, they're trying to acclimate everyone to this very strong police state, very draconian, very militarized. Last year, all those Jade Helm exercises. I mean, there's been a lot of things that happened in 2015 last year that is just absolutely frightening. And then you tie in that with the UN Global Police Force, Obama's handpicked global UN police force working lockstep with all these other agencies. And then on the heels of that, you have the gun grabbing. So it all really fits, doesn't it?
Well, the military units, they're going to be Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Air Force, and Marine Special Elite units, but they're also going to be matched up with the DEA, DHS, LEA, FBI, JPRA. They're going to be paired with that as well as the intelligence agencies. And so, like you were saying, it's obvious to grab guns, but one of the benefits for them to grab guns is not that they're getting the guns, because our guns are not that big of a threat, but it's the people that have those guns that they're more concerned about. And going in house to house looking for guns is going to give them a lot of contact with the people that they want to take down. So I think the people on the lists are more targets than the guns. But yeah, they definitely will go in and do that. In World War II, if you were someone who was Japanese and a community leader, they would use the fact that you had a kitchen knife. They would say, well, you've got a weapon, and they would arrest you. Basically, whoever they want to arrest, they're going to have a pretext to do it.
Well, and the surprising thing is, even though Obama's a total despot, I mean, he makes Benito Mussolini look like child's play. There's more treasonous shenanigans and chicanery that go on with, as I call Hitlery, Mao Zedong in a skirt. And yet these people, there might be little rumors that they're going to be charged or prosecuted, but it's surprising nothing ever happens to these absolute devil charlatans just like Hillary.
Yeah, she's going to sail through all of these scandals just like she has before. But what I'm hoping is all the lies that the media is saying and all this disinformation, I'm hoping that it will backfire, because when Americans really see what's going on, I hope they remember that they were lied to, and so that it will backfire on these liars.
Yeah, I agree. But when America wakes up is the question. You've got so many people in a dystopic trance, all well. You've got martial law scenarios, false flags every week to try and get the guns, these mass shootings and mind control minions. And then on the heels of that, you always have some of the independent media, the new media that reports on this stuff. I mean, we can't compete with the media spin doctors. We report all this stuff, and yet people they're still in a trance while the media controls the narrative. And then isn't it convenient what's happening in China, what's happening with BRICS, the IMF, the economy? We're on the verge of a complete economic meltdown. Food prices are soaring. I mean, the rigging, the manipulation, it's all mind-numbing. And who would have ever thought that oil would drop below $26 a barrel? I mean, all of this is just a frightening coalescence for complete subjugation, really.
Oh, yeah. And I've been warning about it looks very likely that China ranks as a reserve currency, which is going to dethrone the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Already, the second in command there at the IMF has been telling people that this year China's yuan is going to be elevated to reserve currency status. So it seems likely that I think that's really what they plan to do. Of course, they could change their mind, but and now you're getting into one of the things that I brought out, and that is this is war against us. It's a war that the elite are doing against us. And I'm sure you're familiar with that book, Silent Weapons.
Yes.
And that's what people don't realize is that the elite are waging a war against us. And what do you do in war? You create this fog of war where the other side can't tell what's going on. And so that's what's being done is just we've got so many different things coming at us, and a lot of them will never be followed up. They're just stuck out there as distractions. And then a lot of these people that are out there pretending to be like you and I, exposing things, they're just muddying the waters with craziness.
Craziness indeed. But as you were talking, I cannot help but think of the many, many parallels to 1930s Nazi Germany. I think back to last summer when I was reporting on Jade Helm. You had the symbol of the wooden shoes. You've got all this subjugation. You've got all this insanity, the chaos. In my book, I talk a lot about the Nazis. Steve Quayle just released a book on the Nazis. You've got Mein Kampf being released, Hunting Hitler. And then concurrent to that, you've sort of got a revival of the Nazi occultism. Steve Quayle gets into that in his book, The Vril, the Thule. The rise of the occult nowadays is frightening as well.
Well, yeah, that's definitely your Northern European occultism, your Druidism and Satru and so forth. The oak, where you're going is definitely there. And there's a lot of symbolism that these people it's more than symbolism. It's actually, they believe there's magical qualities in these, the oak. So yeah, there's definitely something what you're talking about there. Just like the whole Holocaust being like a sacrifice, and then all of the casualties of World War II being even a more super sacrifice. These concepts are there within the elite, and they definitely giggle to themselves that they're doing things according to these occult ideologies or belief systems. So yeah, there's definitely something there too. It just like the death head. We look at the SS and the Schutzstaffen that were Hitler's secret service. Started out that way, and then they eventually developed Waffen-SS divisions. That death heads goes way back in the occult, long before the SS was created. So yeah, this stuff goes way back into the occult beliefs.
Well, and what's so interesting on the heels of that is how you get into these nefarious companies that finance the war. Do you tie a lot of what happened in Nazi Germany? You talk about Hitler in Bloodlines of the Illuminati, how Hitler was a Rothschild, and also how Prescott Bush and other nefarious groups finance the whole Nazi war effort. I mean, it is frightening how much you get into Hitler and the Nazis and the nefarious connections, the who's who of the global devils that financed all this. You tie all that in your book so well.
Oh, well, hey, George Bush's family, Prescott Bush and Brown Harriman, they helped finance Hitler. They were making profits off of one of the concentration camps, and this was known by the U.S. government, and the money that they made off of that concentration camp is what allowed the Bush family to, after World War II, to get into politics. So there's quite a connection there between some of our leadership and the Nazis. Just like another parallelism is how powerful banking interests like the Morgans and some of these others, Jewish financiers, financed the Russian Revolution. Likewise, Hitler got some financing and assistance from America. And not only that, but the close connections were protected, like the Ford factories over in Germany and some of these other factories were off limits to our bombers. So, there were young people right after World War II that were subjected to this mind control, that were trained and programmed to be suicide bombers. It's not natural for a person to strap on a mini nuke and go blow something up. That's, people have a very strong survival instinct. So these suicide bombers and these people that are shooting up schools, this is all this trauma-based mind control, and these are programmed people. And in the Middle East, you have people that are being programmed. Israeli intelligence is great at programming people to go be an Islamic suicide bomber. Every time that Israel needs a suicide bomber to get sympathy, strangely it happens, as if the Muslims are so stupid to shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak. But it's being used to manipulate events all over the place, in this country especially. And that kind of programming's been going on for a long time. When I was trying to deprogram people with Illuminati mind control, the trauma-based mind control, across the board, I was finding all of these people had Armageddon programming, so that when these last days happen, they would be involved in the chaos in some way. Some of these people stirring up trouble in the streets are going to be under mind control. Some of the people that are going to be on the police will be under mind control. Some of the people taking leadership positions to try to resolve these chaotic situations have been trained, not only programmed, but trained to be able to do what they need. So a lot of these things that seem like they're randomly happening are actually the end result of a very detailed program. And if people want to see a movie, watch this Charles Bronson movie, The End Result of This Trauma-Based Mind Control. And that's what the Green Berets are involved with, and the Navy SEALs. Most, if not 100% of these elite soldiers are under this trauma-based mind control.
Oh, and remember, you had that one insider that shared with you the human sacrifice that those Green Berets did up at Fort Lewis. That is frightening.
Oh, yeah. And there was a military leader, and he was in a position that it was obvious that he had to know about it. And he pretends like, well, I don't know anything. I've never heard about it. Yeah, right. But then when I was watching that, I thought, well, that could be one of two things. He obviously really does know about it and he's lying, or he could be a programmed multiple personality, and one of his personalities that didn't know about it was pulled up and is sincerely ignorant.
maybe. But a lot of these military leaders, look at Michael Aquino. If that isn't a just pure devil, Mr. Temple of Set, satanic pedophile, psychological warfare specialist in the U.S. Army, these are devils.
Right. And he's been in the St. Louis area continuing to program people. Very nasty person.
Well, I could look up every word in the dictionary under nasty, and that probably wouldn't come close to these satanic sickos. Well, in the waning moments, did you ever find out if Osama Bin Laden did a book review on your Bloodlines of the Illuminati?
I was humorously thinking to myself, and this is all fictitious, but, when they come in to shoot him and he's reading my book and he says, hey, wait, I got to finish this chapter.
Oh, I've got to finish this last chapter. That's too good. Well, and he should have finished that last chapter because let me tell you, that last chapter was good. So was the whole book. It probably did bring a lot of attention to the book, of course. The question is, what's the agenda behind that play? You got to wonder when you're as paranoid as me, why would they be doing that? It's so interesting. But speaking of the book and where people can get it and your other amazing writings, give out your website for the listeners, please, Fritz.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to do that, Sheila. It's pentracks.com. And the way it's spelled is P-E-N, like you would write with a pen, P-E-N, and then tracks is like the tracks that a bunny rabbit makes in the snow. So pentracks.com is my website. You can see the books that we've been talking about. That Bloodlines of the Illuminati book has been, it's sold more than any of my other books. And it's an excellent book. It should be in every library. I mean, I'm a researcher and I go into a lot of libraries and I see a lot of junk books and I wonder, my book is of the caliber it should be in there considering all the rest of these junky books, but very few libraries have my book.
Yeah, that's so true. But if it's any consolation, my personal library has it. And many other people's personal libraries have it too. I really encourage everyone to get it because it is a compilation like no other. 600 and something pages of mind-numbing unbelievableness. Is that a word? Truly an unbelievable compilation. Fritz, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. And do come back and see us real soon.
Well, thank you, Sheila. I enjoyed it. And I'm glad that you're still in there broadcasting. That's your calling. When you know that you've been called to do something, if you don't do it, you don't feel good about yourself. So I'm glad to see you fulfilling your calling.
Well, I really appreciate that, Fritz, because I'll tell you what, it wouldn't be the calling I would pick. Such huge challenges when you are called to do this kind of exposing work. Of course, you're very familiar with that. You went to federal prison for 8 years. It reminds me of, you have a lot in common with Kent Hovind and others who were thrown in federal prison for exposing the truth.
Yeah. He and I did about the same amount of time, and we were both in the BOP. I was not treated like a common criminal, and he wasn't either. So I'm sure we have a lot of things that happened to us that were parallel or similar.
Parallel or similar, indeed. There's a lot of persecution for people in this field. Folks, that was the amazing Fritz Springmeier. Go to weekendvigilante.com and his bio and website are linked there. Thank you so much for tuning into the broadcast today. We'll see you.